Welcome. Hi, this is the very first time I've done an activity live. Welcome to Science Week. My name's Tammy and we're actually broadcasting our activity today from Woodcroft Library. So I'm not sure if anyone has been to Woodcroft Library before. If you haven't, come and visit. If you have, you might have seen me around the place, but I really hope that you come and visit afterwards or come and visit your local library. And we are here celebrating Science Week, which we've actually taken Science Week and made it into 2 weeks, which is really cool. So we've got a couple more events this week, but today we are celebrating our marine environments, but we're actually looking at something that sometimes does unfortunately happen to our marine environment, which is an oil spill. But before we get into that, we'll just let you know a couple of things about how this activity will run today. I'm hoping it will run today. My name's Tammy. I'm here as I'm doing the science experiment with you guys today. But we've got Angela, who's on the laptop and filming, who's just behind the camera. And Angela is here to be able to help you with some questions. So throughout the activity today, if you've got any questions or you'd like to say something about what's happening, if you go to the little Q&A tab, you can click that and you'll be able to ask a question. And then Angela will see that question and she can then ask me for you guys, okay? So please feel free to ask as many questions or have comments throughout the activity. The more the better. I'd love your participation. That would be really good. I'm hoping that you guys have had the opportunity to pick up one of these from your local library. This has just got a little bit of information about oil spills, but it's also got some things in here that we'll need to do the activity today. And I must apologise, there is one thing that we will need for today that is not in the list, which is a couple of cups. So if you grab a couple of glasses or a couple of cups or mugs or whatever, that's just what we need to do to collect some of the dirty cotton balls. So if you've got 5 or 10 minutes, if you're logging on with and you've got a couple of people with you, maybe you could get mum or dad or brother or sister to quickly whip over and grab a couple of cups. That would be great, just so it doesn't make too much of a mess, although we're going to make a little bit of a mess. And that's why I've got some paper underneath here, but then I'm in a library and I don't really want to get oil all over the books. So, are you ready to make an oil spill? I hope so. But, as we were talking about before, it's Science Week and it's celebrating our marine life. And in Australia, Australia is surrounded by 3 oceans. So, do you know what the oceans are that we kind of have surrounding our continent? Well, I think we've got one called the Southern Ocean, which I think is south. That sounds about right. And to the west would be the Indian Ocean, so where Western Australia is. And on the eastern side is the Pacific Ocean. We've got 3 beautiful big oceans surrounding our continent. And within the Pacific Ocean, or the Southern Pacific Ocean, there's the Tasman Sea. And the Tasman Sea runs between the east coast of Australia and New Zealand. So you might have heard some of those oceans or done a little bit of research at school. So they're the 3 oceans that we have. And also in terms of today's activity, what we're going to be doing is including the beaches and the coastlines because they're also affected by oil spills if they're closer to shore. Okay, so when I was thinking about an oil spill and looking at different ways of explaining what an oil spill was, I was thinking maybe some of you might not have actually seen an oil spill or might not really know what a particular term of it is. So I did a bit of research and I found the Encyclopedia Britannica online, and I'm just going to read it because what they class an oil spill is a leakage of petroleum onto the surface of a large body of water or land. So it can be both. But in this instance, we're going to be looking at doing one in water, but obviously in a controlled environment. Okay, you might have seen in this activity pack that a little fact was that it just says that as little as 1 litre of oil, which is just a little bit bigger than this, can actually spread to the size of a soccer pitch. So if you can imagine this being over the size of a soccer pitch, can you imagine how much oil can do damage to a huge amount of coastline? And that's amazingly, it's an amazingly sad fact, but it's an interesting one to keep in mind. So we're actually going to now start with our experiment. So I've got my container. You can have one that is, you can use whatever you like, but I just picked one that can be disposed of. But because of the environment, we can wash and reuse this one again. And it's good if you've got things that you can wash and reuse, because then you don't have to put it in the recycling so much. And then we're going to add some water. So I'm going to put my running sheet over there. I don't want to get oil and water on my running sheet either. Fill it up as much as you can. Hope you can see that. Great. So that's our ocean, or our body of water for today. Then we're going to get some oil. So this one's actually canola oil. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not something really expensive that mum and dad might not like you to have. But we'll put a little bit of oil on this. So the ratio is 1:4. So we really want to make quite a bit of oil. Yeah, so I'm just going to put maybe half a cup, maybe, well, that much in my oil bottle. So that's looking pretty slick as it is. So when you're having a look at your experiment at home, it should have lots of little oil bubbles and it's starting to swirl, and it might give you a little bit of an indication as to you guys as to see exactly how it can spread around. It's got some really interesting little patterns. And to make it look like crude oil, which is really yucky and brown and sometimes black and tarry, I'm going to actually add some cocoa, which reminds me a little bit of brewing and cooking, but we're kind of going to cook this into a little oil spill. So we'll grab a little spoon or something that you've got to stir it. So if you've got some plastic spoons with them, give it a stir, and then we're just going to mix it all up. And this is why I'm really glad I've got some paper underneath this, because I've just made a really big mess, but that's okay. It's probably good that I made a really big mess, because oil spills make a huge mess. So once you've stirred it, and it's going to look a little bit yucky and shiny and brown and a bit sludgy, we're going to add some of the things that we were going to add in our experiment to simulate the marine life. So I've got some twigs. Where are my twigs gone? I have some twigs today. Here's some twigs. That's going to just represent some of the floating, some of the beach. Well, I guess you call it, there's some driftwood and things like that. We're going to add some of those in. I've got some nice big sticks. Just going to pop them in, just let them soak up a little bit of the oil. Then we're going to add some feathers. Now, my feathers are a little bit messy. I've got this beautiful big feather. I'm going to add this in because this is going to simulate our marine wildlife, the pelicans, the penguins, the ibises, the storks, anything. I can see floating feathers everywhere. Anything that lives in the marine environment that we know of. Okay, so I'm going to add some of these feathers in as well, just because we'll add a different lot. They might represent some of the other wildlife we have. And then I have some rocks. And I've also got actually a little piece of coral, which is going to simulate some of the coastlines and the rocks on the beach, the bottom of the ocean, and some of the other fun things like that. So obviously the coral reefs and things like that. So I'm going to pop them in as well. And I'm just going to let it sit there and congeal and get all yucky and covered in stuff, which will then, when we get to the next part of our experiment, we'll see exactly how much is covered and see how we can clean it up. But in the meantime,
we did have a question.
Oh, we've got a question. Excellent.
Can oil harm the animals?
I honestly think that it can. I think the oil, you'd have to do a lot of research, but I'd say the oil would coat the feathers of marine animals, and the marine animals have a particular coating of oil of their own protection, especially like birds like penguins. They're so slick, they've got their own oil, so it would compromise the oil. Would compromise their own oil and their own feathers. With bigger birds that fly, it would make their feathers sticky and gummy, and they might not be able to fly. They might swallow it, and then that will harm them because they've swallowed poison and because it's petroleum. Absolutely, I think it would definitely harm the animals. You could do a lot of research on your own if you wanted to find out a little bit more information about just how that happens. That's a very good question, because unfortunately oil slicks can do a huge amount of damage to not only ecosystems but have a lot of loss of wildlife, unfortunately, including, unfortunately, some human life, depending on how the oil slick occurred. So do some research. We've got some books at the end of the session I can promote. We've got some great books in the library. But yeah, it can harm the wildlife. That's a great question.
It also affects the marine plants, because the plants, even though they're underwater and stuff, they need light.
That's right.
And if the oil is coating them, they can't get any light.
That's right. And oil sits on the surface of the water, so it'll absorb that sunlight, and they won't be able to get that light at the bottom. So yes, it's a huge deal when oil gets out. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit while this stuff gets all sunken in. When I was a little kid, there was a really, really nasty an oil spill called the Exxon Valdez. We actually had to do a project on it when I was a kid in school. It was huge. It was at the time the biggest the biggest accidental oil spill in the world. And unfortunately, if anyone out there is watching the news, and I know some people don't watch the news or watch BTN or don't watch the news, as early as the 25th of July this year, a Japanese cargo ship struck a reef off the coast of Mauritius and lost hundreds of tons of oil into the Mauritius, their ecosystem. They have the most unique and tranquil ecosystems, threatening the lives of sea turtles, rare birds. There was even a rare pink pigeon species. So that's very recent, and they're still trying to clean that up. So that's only been a couple of months ago. So there's a lot. It damaged quite a lot, and that's such a small island nation. It has such a unique ecosystem. So it's quite... it's good that we're doing this kind of activity now, because we can then try and think of ways that we can help, do this in case it happens in the future. But what I'd like to do, what our experiment today is going to be all about, is the biggest the biggest accidental oil spill in the world. Okay, so I just would like you guys to just sit back for a moment, and I'm going to read something out to you. So this will help put your experiment today into context, okay? So the largest accidental oil spill began in the Gulf of Mexico on the 20th of April 2010, after a surge of natural gas blasted through a cement well cap that had recently been installed to seal a well drilled by the Deepwater Horizon oil platform, the great big oil platform in the middle of the ocean to drill for oil. The gas travelled up the rig's riser to the platform, where it was ignited, killing, unfortunately, 11 workers and injuring 17 people. The oil platform capsized and sank 2 days later, but before the well was capped several months later in September, so that happened in April, and it was capped in September. That's April, May, June, July, August, September, 5 months. Some 134 million gallons of oil were released, and they're actually thinking that there might have been more, up to nearly, I was saying it might have been up to 206 million gallons of oil, which is a huge amount. It travelled approximately 2,100 kilometres, so that's a really big amount. But to put it in our perspective, it's like from Adelaide to Brisbane, in fact a little bit higher than Brisbane. So if you could imagine that, it's absolutely huge. It's massive. And the company that was responsible for that, which is BP, they were deemed to be the responsible party for this, and they had to pay $65 billion in compensation to all the people that lost their incomes and livelihoods from the spill. So all the fish and all the people that lived on the water. So it was a huge, huge accidental oil spill. So for our experiment, you guys have an engineering company, okay? You've been tasked with the cleanup of this oil spill, okay? You can only use the materials that you've collected from the sheet, which are cotton balls, spoons, and some sponges and some dish detergent, okay, to try and clean up some of the excess oil, okay? You've got to clean up the oil from the water, the twigs, the feathers, and the rocks, okay? We're going to try, this is when we need the cups, try and get as much oil and brown stuff off the feathers and put it into the cups, okay? And then we're going to put all the dirty stuff on the other side, okay? Unless you've got somewhere that you can put all the dirty stuff at home, okay? And we're going to have 15 minutes to do it. Do you think you can do it? Got some really good environmental engineers out there. So you ready? I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and I'm going to do the experiment as well. So if you've got any questions, or work together if you've got other people there, ask mum and dad any questions, see how you go. And then at the end of 15 minutes, we'll see how much oil we're going to get in this container. Are you ready? Let's go. I'll set my timer. This is going to be good. I'm going to try and get a lot. See how I go with my timer. Here we go, 15 minutes. Now, okay. If I was an environmental engineer, what would I do? So I've got a whole lot of sticky feathers. I've got a whole lot of dirty rocks. I'm going to start by using this spoon, I think. I'm going to see if I can dredge some of the oil off. I'm not sure. Oh, it's not very good. See how we go. I think it's going to be trickier than I thought. That's okay. Let's see if I can get some of that off. I don't know, Angela. This might be a little bit tricky. Here we go.
It sure looks tricky.
It is a little bit tricky, but I'm thinking if it's going to be a little bit tricky doing this experiment like this, imagine what it's going to be like with 2,100 kilometres of things, of coastline that's been affected by all this oil and all the and all the oil is going to be like. So this will be really interesting. So I might try with my, well, I don't think this one's going to work, but I'll give it a go. I might be here for a while. See how we go. I wonder which ones you guys started with. Be interested to see how you guys are going to go with getting this oil off. I'm having some initial limited results with the spoon because the oil wants to stick to the spoon. So I'm just wondering whether or not I might keep going with that, but I can skim some of the oil off the surface. I've got that much so far, which really is about 1 millimetre. But it's really tricky because we've got to get the twigs out of the oil too, which is a little bit tricky. But we'll see how we go. It's starting to look a lot more congested with fluff and bits and pieces now, which will be really interesting. Maybe I might use some of the dish detergent and see what that happens. I wonder what dish detergent does with oil. Give it a try. I've got a lot. Let's see how I go. Now, I'll just put this little bit in here. This might be fraught with disaster, but oh, there you go. Excellent. Pop that there. Ooh. Oh, that might not be. That might be better than I thought. Let's see. See, the detergent is actually repelling the oil, which is doing the opposite of what I needed to do on this sponge, because I need the oil to kind of absorb into the sponge. Angela, I didn't think that would happen, but that's okay. This is why we experiment, so we can get a hypothesis. And then one day when we are environmental engineers and we get called to fix one of these things, we can say, I know this bit didn't work. We won't try soap, but we could try an absorbent sponge. It just depends. See how we could do a barrier of, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to make a barrier out of my sponge and see if I can contain, I'm going to make a barrier out of my sponge soaked with detergent. Let's see if that works. The only thing is I only brought one sponge. If you're doing this at home, you might find that you might need a couple more sponges depending on how big your container is. But if the oil is not attracted to that, I don't know if that's actually oil or not. I'll have to just see. It's looking like oil. We'll just have to see how it goes. I do like the idea of using the soap though. That's pretty good. Do you think the soap will clean up all the twigs? I don't know. It kind of reminds you when you're doing the dishes at home. If you've got really dirty, oily dishes, does the soap help with the oil there? Does it come off? Maybe I'll try that with the twig in a minute and see what we can think of. Don't really, it is a bit dirty, so we'll have a look and see if we can get any oil that way. Have you had any questions or anything like that? Everyone's still busy doing their experiment? Awesome. I'm hoping it's going good for you guys. I'm making a bit of a mess, but I'm very lucky I did put some paper underneath it.
Someone did ask if the animals recover on their own if they're not found right away, and I don't think they do.
I honestly don't know. I'd be leaning towards your answer, Angela, because I mean it's a very heavy substance, and I think I just think with the wildlife, it's poison. So
and they can't actually get it off their own feathers.
No,
and they can't fly, and they're actually drowned. Most of them drowned.
That's right. Yeah, they drown, or they're poisoned because it's just too heavy, and then they can't float. And then with other things like the fish, it suffocates them. So because they're not getting the oxygen in the water because they need that sunlight to help create the oxygen in the water, and it's really tricky.
And someone said that they read somewhere that the treatment does not really save the animals because the damage is already done. And I think in a lot of instances that is correct. Mm-hmm. I think we hear the good news stories of the animals that are saved because it's so catastrophic. That you need some good news stories, but I think a lot of animals don't survive it.
Absolutely. You're right, and if it's a really good thing then if you like to go and do some further exploration and some research, and then depending on, of course, at home, if you're not used to looking at the news and find things like that a little bit confronting, or you just not quite sure, do it with mum and dad, because mum and dad will be able to help filter that information for you. And we've got some really good children's information books. I'll show you again afterwards that I picked most of the facts from Encyclopedia Britannica and some of the facts from the children's books. And then that way then mum and dad or whoever you're with at home can then help translate that information for you, so that you can understand that without being too confronting, because it can be confronting. So it's very confronting, and it's just really tricky because it's all a man-made problem, and the need for petroleum and to explore and to get it. Unfortunately, as we were saying, the 2010 one is accidental, so because natural gas came up, but the biggest oil spill of all time was actually done on purpose in the Gulf War of 1991. So it was another project I did when I was a kid at primary school, where they didn't want in the Middle East, they didn't want the enemy advancing through the waters, so they basically let all the oil tankers out. So it's really tricky. So it's really devastating and can be really sad. So, but the great thing about doing this is we can think of ways to clean it up. And while we've been talking, I've been trying to get some of the surface oil off with this sponge. But the best thing I found that's worked all right for me is soaking these sponges in some dish oil. Because the dish oil seems to be cleaning it up. It's really a little bit tricky to get the oil off without getting the water. But I'll try this particular feather. Looks a little bit sad and soaked with oil, so that's a good little representation of thinking like a cormorant or a stork or something like that, so a bird like that. So maybe we can try using, I haven't used the cotton balls yet. I've also bought some paper towel because I know I'm going to get very messy. Did you have another question coming, or no? All good. Right, we'll see how the cotton balls go, because cotton balls are quite absorbent, but you probably would find that we need a huge amount of cotton balls. So if you can think about maybe, that's looking all right. So it's pretty good. So if we can get some of the oil out, it's good food for thought to think about what happens with the oil after they get the oil from the seed or from the birds, what happens to the oil, the byproduct of that, what they do with it. So that's another thing we can research, and you can research at home. That's a really good little further investigation for you. That'd be great as budding environmental engineers and sustainability warriors, I'd like to call them. So that'd be great. I'm going to put that in there because that made a massive mess. Haven't had a lot of luck with my feather, but I'm going to try and use some of the cotton balls, I reckon, on the feather. I don't know. It's really interesting to see how the people, and a lot of the people that do help are actually volunteers. They volunteer to come down and scrub rocks. You might have seen somewhere, maybe in some books, people scrubbing rocks with scrubbers, and it's just that's that kind of thing as well. So I haven't had a go with my rock yet, but this is what my feather looks like after I've tried to soak the oil off. So I might try a different feather now. This one's a little bit more it's lovely. It's nice to get all hands-on with science. It's a little bit messy, but that's what we've done. Very messy. So we'll just check the timer and see how we go. We've got 4 minutes and 30 seconds left. So I will put my feather there because I think I'm quite happy with the way that this has been cleaned or dried. That doesn't look too bad actually. The cotton balls don't do too bad a job, and look, it's all gross and yucky, and it's just getting the oil off. That's the tricky part, but we'll keep going. I'm going to try this big feather now because that one, you can actually see, you might be able to see the oil. You might be able to see that. I mean, by doing that at home with your own feathers, you'll be able to have a look and see how. See, a lot of the oil came off, but there's other parts that's just soaked straight into the feathers, and you see how the feathers are all bunched together. That's why they can't preen themselves. That's why they can't fly, because they need the air to get through. So there's that one. Although it didn't soak the little, I'm going to put the little fluffy bits on the bottom there. So see how that's. So if you imagine a pelican that's looking like that, it's a bit. So I'm going to try the sponge, and let's see if the sponge will work. Maybe if I put some of this dish detergent, and in hindsight, I probably should have put the dish detergent in a small cup first, but that's okay. If you guys are at home, you never know, you might not have a bottle as big as this, but that's okay. Everything works, it's all good. So if I try this, I'm going to give this a go. I'll put this here and see if I can get. So I'm wondering whether or not it's almost like when you're using a soap to dissolve oil, a bit like sometimes when you shampoo your hair, but that might be why it's, I don't know whether that's making it better or not. That might even make it worse, because you probably have to rinse them off. I don't know, what do you guys think? It depends on what you guys are up to in your experiment, but what do you think, Angela? Not too bad? Well, it's
looking a bit better, but
it is looking a bit better. But
I don't know if that was my skin and my
just trying to
feathers. I don't know if I'd still be happy with it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a massive penguin who's feeling really agitated and scared and quite sick and unwell, and getting a whole lot of dish detergent and going, and well, we'll see how we go. But I'm actually quite excited about this part because my sponge barrier that I have made with the soap has actually pushed the oil away. So maybe that's something we can talk about afterwards, but I haven't quite. I think that's another feather, and that's
far gone.
That's quite squishy, and I don't know if I'd be able. Well, I give it a go because we have to try and rescue as much as we can for our experiment and also for our wildlife. So we'll see how we go here.
Do you think once they rescue animals, do you think they put them back in the same spot? Most of the time, I would assume. If the ocean is damaged by the oil, then they you'd be hesitant to put it back there, wouldn't you? Really?
I was actually just thinking that what you were saying, because I mean it will take, I think depending on the method, but it would probably take months and months to clean up. And also maybe if they are able to be integrated into another closer environment, but a lot of the animals, their local, like that's their home, like that's their little, it's like your neighborhood. So like you have to, they might not be able to go into another environment. They might have to be looked after by an RSPCA or a World Wildlife Fund, or they might be able to then put them into care and make sure they're better if they can rescue them and then rehome them. They might not be able to go back home. They might end up being in a wildlife refuge, unfortunately. But that might be, that's certainly better than the alternative, which is them to not be on the earth. But it's really sad, because that's why a lot of animals are in zoos and things, because they, you know, their natural habitat's compromised, and we need to put all our energies into the preservation of their environment. So that's the timer. So that's the whole 15 minutes. So I'm just going to stop my timer. So I'd be really interested to see how you go. And I was having so much fun, I didn't even actually get to my rocks, but I was, I've made a lovely mess. I hope you guys have made a mess. But as you can see, it's even all over my pen. So how did you guys go? Did you find that quite an interesting experience? I did, because this is only the second time I've ever done this, and I use different feathers, and it's really good. I never used the spoons before. So if you could let us know, is there anything that you did today that you found really worked the best, like it was the best way to do it? For example, I soaked my sponges in some dish detergent, and the oil is propelled, is what's the word? It's not propelled, but it's repelled. That's it. Like when you put two magnets together that like bounce off each other. So the oil was repelled by the dish soap, so it pushed it into the corner. So then I could then get the bigger blobs of oil from the top. But I didn't have a whole lot of luck getting some of the oil off the top. But I used some of the cotton balls that seemed to work well for me, especially getting the oil off some of the feathers and the sticks. So is there anything, did you guys try some of those and have any thoughts about that? Is there anyone thinking about? Well, I was thinking actually what didn't work, and I was trying to think maybe the spoon didn't work for me because it was too slippery. And it just felt like I was just trying to get the oil off, but at the same time it kind of sticks on the spoon and I couldn't get it off. So that's about as much gunky oil as I managed to collect. Do you think it was easy, or do you think it was really hard? It's a really interesting little experiment to do, because it's actually quite hard, isn't it? And we've got the feathers. So as I said, if you can imagine that, this being the sea, if it was hard for us to just get this much in 15 minutes, imagine it would take months and months to clean up something like this. But while I was looking at some of the cleanup methods that people use, and one of the things that people had used or mentioned was hair, because hair seems to have properties that be able to absorb or repel oil. So a lot of the time they have great big floating barriers across that almost look like a whole bunch of the little tiny Frankfurt sausages all rolled together, and they have a massive span, and it kind of stops the oil from floating further out to sea, and then they can pull the whole lot in. So it must have that repelling quality to it, so it can push the oil closer to the shore, and then they can dredge it from there. But one of the things maybe you guys can have a look at is, what do they do with the oil once they get it off the rocks and the seabed and the animals? What do they do with that byproduct, and how do they dispose of it? So that would be really, really interesting. And speaking of disposing, because we are environmental engineers and we're sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and we're conscious of our environment, we've finished our experiment. We actually have to now clean up this experiment so that we don't do damage ourselves by just getting the stuff that we've done today and just go, nah, I don't want to dispose of that. We've got to dispose of everything correctly. So that was another little project in itself. So basically, now we've got to do our own oil spill cleanup, but a real cleanup. So you ready? I've got some really, 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 really soggy feathers. Okay, so these feathers, so if you grab all the feathers out that you've used, once you maybe just get some of the oil off them, so just pat them with a paper towel, okay? You can pat them with a paper towel. Once you've patted them with a paper towel and they're a little bit dry, you can actually put these in your green bin, okay? So you can take your feathers out and put them in the green bin, okay? I'm gonna let these soak out and dry a little bit, okay? So they can go in your green bin. We can put all that in there like that. And again with the twigs, okay? So once you clean off and dry all the excess oil off, okay? Use your paper towel. So if you've got like the little paper towels, like your serviettes or anything like that, these can go in the green bin. And these can go in the green bin, okay? Because you can put them in your green bin, okay? So next, rocks. There's a couple of things you can do with your rocks. If you really like your rocks, you can wash them and then you can reuse them again, or you can, once you've washed them, you can put them back in your garden. But if you don't, you can just take your rocks, dry them off a little bit, and they can go in your red bin, okay? So we can put them in your red bin. We've got to dispose of them correctly, but they're very cool. So if you want to put them in your garden, just make sure that they're all nice and washed, okay? Sponges can be squished out and they can go in your red bin, okay? So that's all good. Now, we've got one big thing. Actually, we'll do some other things first. With the classes, like any of these little things, the oil, the cotton buds, stuff that can go in the red bin, but your containers, depending on what containers you used, obviously I'm not going to be recycling these because they're glass. I'm just going to wash and put these away. But if you've used plastic cups and you want to keep them, just wash them, put them back in. But if you don't want to keep them, just dry out all the excess oil and they can go in the yellow bin. That's right, so that's your plastic bin. Okay, same with your spoons. Some people like to keep these again. They're perfectly fine. You can rinse them and wash them out in warm water, use them again. But if you don't want to, you can make them into creatures. They make really good little ants if you've got some pipe cleaners. But if you don't, again, wipe the excess oil off and put them in the yellow bin, remember? So I've got some spoons that I need to do some washing. Okay, remember all the little cotton buds will go in the red bin. Any of the paper towels can go in the green bin. I'm making a little pile now, so this. But this is the main part, the oil and the water. We don't want to put that down the sink because then that's just like what we've just done, okay? So what we can do is we can get some newspaper, which I've got here. Grab a couple of big sheets of newspaper, scrunch it up, and make a noise now. Sorry, Angela. And let it soak in your container, okay? You just have, this is the bit where you have to be a bit patient. So you just need heaps of this. All the liquid has to be soaked up by the newspaper, okay? So once all the liquid is soaked up, the newspaper can go in the red bin, okay? And then with the container, if you've got one at home that you're using that's like Mum's Best Tupperware or like a ceramic one or something that you shouldn't really be throwing away, just wash and reuse it. I'm going to wash and reuse this one. If not, and I decide, we can throw these ones in the yellow bin, okay, if you've got something like a foil tray, okay? But hopefully you can wash and reuse it, and that would be really good. So that's our experiment for today. If you are looking for some extra things that you'd like to read, I'll show you a couple of things. And before I do that, if you've got any more questions about recycling, you can come into the library or council and get one of these. This is what I got some of the information with. Okay, it's a little recycling booklet. It tells you what you can recycle and where you can recycle to. So there's some green stuff there. There's the twigs. You can grab one of these. Every council office has one. Or you can visit our website, or you can give council a ring, because today I rang and spoke to a waste education recycle officer. He gave me some help and tips about how to recycle all these, and then I got the rest from here. Okay, so, and we need to do the right thing by our environment. So there you go. That's what that little guide is. So if you would like to do some reading, some extra, I hope so, because we're in a library and it's a great place to do extra stuff. There's this one. This one is about the Exxon Valdez. As you can see, this is just a little snapshot of what the people had to do to clean up the oil spill. And it's just a great book. It's children's non-fiction, so it's factual, but not too distressing. So hopefully, but again, if you're not quite sure, get mum and dad to read through it. Okay, so there's this one. This series is really good. There's a whole lot of environmental disaster books in this series. So I got some information about this as well. That's a particular oil tanker on the front. So you can try this one as well. Examining oil spills, and that's got a really confronting but powerful image of a bird on the front. And there's a whole lot of books in this series of different other like disasters and bridge collapses and things. So you can try that one. This one actually is a picture book, but it's about an oil spill. So yeah, and it's by an Australian author as well. So you can see the hands in the earth and the little penguin that's just been affected by the oil spill. And for all our adults that are out there that would like to read a little bit more about oil spills, we have asked to buy a couple more books for our collection. But this one in particular, Drowning in Oil, is based, is actually the 2010 Deep Blue Horizon, or Deep Water Horizon oil spill. So that's one of the books that we've brought in from another library. So we've asked to get some more. Okay. So I really hope that you've had some fun doing our science experiment today, and I really hope that you've learned a little bit more about the nature of oil spills, and it's given you a little bit more I guess drive to go and find out a little bit more, because it's a massive thing when it happens, and we've got the most beautiful marine environments. We want them to be around for when we grow up older, and we've got our own kids, and we just need to look after them. So, and then in the event that it does happen, which we really hope it doesn't, but in the event that it does happen again, we'll have some brilliant, enthusiastic people that are out there to help clean it up and to minimise the impact. So I hope you had a great, fantastic Science Week. I had a lot of fun doing this. Come and visit us in the library. We'll put some of the books on hold, and happy Science Week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again. Bye.